So we'll get started. For those of you just joining, welcome and thank you again for taking the time to be here. I think that this is an excellent topic coming off of the holidays, right? Maybe we did a little extra dining out, socializing, a little more alcohol, more certain foods, more of things that maybe you weren't eating as much of before, maybe maybe a little extra alcohol. And definitely there's a lot more stress around the holidays. It could be good stress, it could be bad stress, but even stress can trigger inflammation in the body. So there's a lot of things around the holidays. So I think this is a perfect topic for January. Okay, so this is what we're going to cover. We're going to talk about, of course, the anti-inflammatory diet, but I want to start by talking about what is the role that the immune system plays in inflammation. And just some very specific examples. What you'll see, some inflammation is actually necessary. We actually need a little bit of inflammation. And I think that the media has done a pretty good job in kind of getting people a little bit hyped up. This fights inflammation, this decreases inflammation. So what exactly is it? What's going on in the body? What's the immune system doing? So I do have a couple sort of geeked out slides that just have to bear with me that I'll go through. I just want to show you, what's going on in the body. Then we'll talk about some chronic diseases associated with inflammation. Some you probably know, some might surprise you. And then the 4 cornerstones of inflammation. So there are a lot of things that can cause inflammation. We're going to focus on food, but it's important to address some other things that might be going on. So you may find that, you're eating well, you might not be feeling better. So what are some other things that we have to also pay attention to? And then we'll get right into the foods. So foods that decrease and also increase inflammation. And I have some examples of easy meals, so you feel like you can get started right away. And then if there are some questions in the chat, then we'll have a little Q&A at the end. Okay. So what's going on with the immune system and what exactly is inflammation? So the immune system sends these chemical messengers, and that's the inflammatory property. They're called cytokines. So when your body perceives a threat, the immune system will react, and sometimes it's appropriate and necessary. So in this example, let's say we all go out to lunch, all right, and we all eat the same chicken sandwich, we all get salmonella poisoning, and then we all wind up getting a fever as a symptom. Well, what's the point of the fever? Is it purposeful? Well, yeah, because it's going to knock out the salmonella. Where does that come from? Your immune system sends interleukin-6 to your brain, and it says, hey, hypothalamus, heat the body up so we can kill the salmonella, okay? Then once that threat is gone, then the fever goes down, body goes back to normal. So that's considered normal inflammation and necessary, right? Otherwise, we would die from a bad chicken sandwich. Now, what can happen sometimes, and just bear with me with this, the only thing you really need to look at is this line across the bottom. These are all inflammatory markers. And this is an example when the body really just overreacts. So this we don't want to happen. So this is an example of autoimmune disease. But this particular example, if you remember the earlier stages of COVID when people were being hospitalized for respiratory conditions, it actually wasn't even the virus. It was your own immune system overreacting, throwing out this cascade of cytokines, inflammatory markers that was causing it to attack your own lung tissue. So sometimes the body just overreacts and it's harmful. So this anti-inflammatory diet over time, what it does is it helps to attenuate or quiet down the immune system and reduce the risk of chronic disease. And you can even reduce flare-ups in certain diseases if you already have it. Okay, biochemistry lesson is over. All right, so what are some conditions associated? Obesity, definitely. Insulin resistance, there's inflammation. So it can make it very, very difficult to lose weight. If you're overweight and you find that it's difficult, it could be because of inflammation and insulin resistance. And then just a couple of examples, like certain kinds of cancer, say colon cancer. So if your immune system is overreacting and it's attacking your GI tract, you have this turnover of cells constantly. So it's more likely there's going to be a mutation. So that's one of the reasons why you can have an increased risk of certain cancers. with inflammation. So if we look at all these diseases, you can see it seems like almost everything under the sun, almost all chronic illness is associated with inflammation, which is really your own immune system overreacting. Okay, so we're going to focus on diet, but I think all of these really deserve a mention. Stress. Now, stress can be a physical stress, like if you have surgery, if you sprain your ankle, or that's going to cause inflammation. But even emotional stress causes your immune system to overreact. All right. So if you're one of those people where you're ruminating at 2 a.m. about all the problems in the world, right? So our own thoughts can cause an inflammatory response. And I remember I was working with a student. He was going to NYU. He had terrible irritable bowel. I put him on an elimination diet. We figured out different things that were triggering his immune system. And then he was doing beautifully. And then come final exam time, well, he starts backsliding and we didn't change anything. So he was a little bit of an anxious person. So it turned out it was the stress, because as soon as his exams were over, he was perfectly fine. Toxins. So you really need to look in your environment. I often will ask my clients, when was the last time that you felt well? And they might say, well, I moved into a new house and it was full of mold, and that's when I started to feel sick. Or my office moved to new construction, and that's toxin exposure, off-gassing from carpeting and paint and furniture and things like that. So that can actually make you feel unwell. Or even like food poisoning, like what we had just talked about. That can also cause your immune system to overreact. And then genetics, which at this point in time, honestly, genetics, okay, maybe you were handed certain genes from your family, but it doesn't necessarily mean they're going to be expressed. So following an anti-inflammatory diet can help to prevent you from getting certain illnesses that you might have a propensity to. Okay, so now we'll focus on the diet, and we'll just get right into that, and that's what we're going to spend the rest of the time on. So what can we include to decrease inflammation? So omega-3 fatty acids, there's so much good data on colon cancer, rheumatoid arthritis, depression, right? So if you are prone to depression or seasonal affective disorder, adding omega-3 rich foods like salmon, mackerel, cod, tuna, sardines, so fish, grass-fed meats are going to have more omega-3s than your conventional corn-fed cattle, nuts and seeds, and dark leafy greens. One thing about greens is you want to make sure you're getting a variety. That's the best advice that we can give right now. And try not to use a particular food or a vegetable as a panacea, right? Like all the clients say, oh, I eat so many vegetables. I have kale in my smoothie and kale chips and kale salad, kale. But all of these foods are superheroes in their own right. So the best advice really is you want to get a variety of phytonutrients. And then we want to make sure with plants that we're getting a lot of color. So focusing on red, blue, really red, blue, and purple. So they're high in an anti-inflammatory property called anthocyanins. It's a powerhouse of different compounds. They're anti-aging, anti-cancer properties. So very important to include these. A lot of people I think are good with greens and getting salads on their plate, but sometimes they forget about all the other spectrum of color. And then we have to look at how we're cooking our food. I go crazy when I see these cooking shows and they show people stir frying and there's smoke flying everywhere. When you overheat oils past the smoking point, then you're denaturing the oil and it causes an inflammatory reaction in the body. So low heat cooking, cooking below the smoke point, and also using some moist cooking like crock pots and braising. And then adding spices. Now, this might seem like, oh, well, spices, how much do you really add? But these are fat-soluble compounds that build up in the body that we draw upon over time that help to reduce inflammation. So it could be adding some curry to a pot of chili or some cinnamon in your coffee or even some dried spices on your salad. So just a little bit goes a long way. Okay. So now what increases inflammation? Trans fats. Now, thankfully, and finally, in 2018, the FDA mandated that trans fats be removed from processed foods, but companies had 3 years and some were given longer allowances to reformulate their products. You probably don't have any in your pantry right now, unless you've got like just some really, really old Jiffy Pop popcorn or something like that laying around. But the trans fats that you can be getting is when you go out to eat and you're ordering fried food. So when oil gets overheated over and over and over, it breaks down. Trans fats are very, very closely associated with cardiovascular disease. They're very inflammatory to the interior lining of the arterial or artery walls. So trans fats. And sometimes even when we try to order healthfully, I remember specifically ordering Brussels sprouts in a restaurant. It said they were roasted, and when they came, they were blackened and they were definitely deep fried. I remember biting into them and they were just so full of grease. So sometimes even when we try to order a little healthfully. And then again, high heat cooking, I gave the example of, stir fries and smoke points. So if you want to do some sauteing, choose avocado oil, grapeseed oil, sunflower, peanut oil. Even extra virgin olive oil is fine at about 350 degrees if you're roasting in the oven. I read a study, they held extra virgin olive oil at 350 degrees for 24 hours and it did not break down. So just so long as you're roasting at a moderate temperature like 350, olive oil is fine. Now, typical Western diet in America, we're eating way, way too much omega-6 fats. Now, that's mostly going to come from processed foods because they use a lot of soybean oil and corn oil just because it's cheap. So optimally, to protect against heart disease, from omega-6 to omega-3 ratio, we want a 4-to-1. And a typical American diet is 15 times omega-6 to omega-3. So you can see most people could benefit from adjusting that ratio. And then corn-fed cow, it's of course, like they feed them corn, it fattens them up. We want to get them to slaughter within a few months. So they fatten them up and that's what gives it, the nice marbling and the flavors, but excess saturated fats, that's going to cause inflammation. And then for some people, gluten and dairy. Now, that's not for everyone, but some people will do an elimination diet if they have, say, skin issues or irritable bowel, headaches, joint pain. And if we remove certain foods for a time and see if they feel better and add them back in, sometimes gluten and dairy can be triggers. Okay, so if you're doing a lot of dining out, then you're going to be exposed to possibly trans fats, definitely high heat cooking, probably sugars and omega-6. So you'll see I'm going to try to encourage a little more dining in when we talk to some specific examples. In fact, if you can start reading your labels, and for every gram of sugar on a label, every 4 grams is going to be 1 teaspoon of sugar. So start reading your labels. If you go to chain restaurants, look online. For example, Cheesecake Factory, they have their nutritional information. Their teriyaki chicken has 96 grams of sugar. That's the equivalent of half a cup of sugar. And when you order, when you order teriyaki chicken, you think, oh, wow, I'm ordering pretty healthfully. So sometimes these sugars and fats are kind of hidden in there in dining out. Okay, so what are some things that we can do today? So maybe I'm not saying eat 21 meals in your house, because I like to go out too. I like to cook. I don't like to cook all the time. But what are some things that we can do? So cooking a little more at home. So I have a couple of one-pan meals. I'm just going to focus on eggs because they're cheap. It's a pantry food. It's something that most people feel pretty comfortable making. This dish on the left, this is from a presentation that I do. It's called No Bones About It. It's about nutrients to support bone health. So it's just sauteed greens with a couple eggs cracked in it. You throw it in the oven for about 10 minutes, take it out, and this all has a dollop of yogurt on it. And then over here, this is a video from my Instagram feed. My mother called this eggs in purgatory. It's leftover tomato sauce, or you can use any jarred sauce. You crack some eggs in it. I also put peas in mine because they're high in soluble fiber that has a tremendous anti-inflammatory effect, good for gut health. So you just crack your eggs in it and then you pop it in the oven and cook the eggs to however you like them done. And that's it. So really, really simple. And then I also left in the chat, this is a recipe. It's a 1-pan meal that actually I just had the other night. I teach on Mondays, and no way am I going to set up my whole kitchen and break it down. This all just goes in a pan. You throw it in the oven, very quick. So it's a baked lentil cod dish. So you have that recipe. And then some strategies. Like you can buy ready to go vegetables and do some sheet pan meals. I love sheet pan meals. I use parchment paper for easy cleanup. And I'll just show you a quick video. Now, I cut my own vegetables, but again, just buy them cut up. It's so much easier. And I like to put them on a pan separately because that way it keeps the flavors separate. And then spray it with a little bit of good oil, put it in the oven. What you don't want to do is don't cook protein with your vegetables on a sheet pan. I see these videos of people doing like a whole, like whole chicken thighs with the skin with quick cooking vegetables. And just to protect yourself from foodborne illness, you want to cook that in a separate pan. And then it's good to make a little extra, and then you could just use it on salads or in something else the next day. Okay, and then other strategies, batch cooking, soups, like this is an example. This was a split pea soup. Again, peas are very, very high in soluble fiber and high in protein, but that soluble fiber is very good for the gut bacteria, and most of our immune system is happening in the gut. So there's a systemic effect, an anti-inflammatory effect that those fibers provide. So batch cooking, so you can put some things in the freezer, just another kind of strategy just to get to start to preparing more food in the home. And then another strategy could be maybe adding some vegetables at breakfast. So on the left, that's actually what I would call a strategy within a strategy. So a couple of weeks ago, we were in Aruba, and I always like to get a place with a kitchen. Again, I'm not cooking 21 meals a week, especially not on vacation, but I will make breakfast in our place. And so we had this you can't see our view, but nice view with our patio. So I had vegetables that I had grilled on the grill at our place and some greens for a nice breakfast wrap. And then I made a salad. And then on the right, that's just some avocado toast with a poached egg that literally comes together in about 5 minutes. So it's actually a little quicker than making oatmeal, and having some protein, fat, and carbs in your breakfast will help to fuel you through the day. You know, if you think about a typical Western diet, a lot of that fare is very inflammatory. Refined cereals and bagels, it causes your blood sugar to spike, insulin surges, which then is going to lead to blood sugar crashes. Okay, so having some protein, fats, and carbs and vegetables in the morning is a good strategy. Now I'm trying to encourage taking in some extra plants, thinking about plants at your meals. But then, of course, I always get this question, well, can't I just take pills for that? So we really can't get everything in a pill. We know of over 25,000 phytonutrients that have amazing anti-inflammatory properties, and they work synergistically. That's why sometimes when we pull something out of a fruit or a vegetable and try to shove it into a pill, it just doesn't work. So food outperforms supplements. And if you were to try to get 25,000 phytonutrients in a pill, it would probably be the size of a baseball, right? So supplements are there to fill gaps. And there are some times that we need nutrients that are, in a therapeutic dose. So like omega-3 fatty acids. So if you're really trying to treat something, you may need to take a fish oil supplement. But generally speaking, you got to do the food as a foundation. Okay, so just some final pearls, just to kind of recap what we talked about. Don't stress yourself out. Remember, stress causes inflammation. So just pick maybe one meal. Maybe pick one crock pot meal that you're comfortable with, that you could just throw everything in, forget about it for 6 hours, and it'll taste great. Or maybe you're doing some kind of, smoothie service in the morning that is very high in sugar. Maybe you could pick something easy to make at home. And then eating the rainbow. Just remember that the phytonutrients, the anti-inflammatory properties of the plants are the actual pigment. So that's why we want to pick a variety of color. I like to separate for my clients when we're talking about produce is think about 3 categories: color, cruciferous, and leafy greens. So if you can try to choose from those categories every day, then you're going to get an array of phytonutrients. And try not to listen to the media. They pick one, I remember when cauliflower had its heyday: cauliflower pizza crust, cauliflower gnocchi, cauliflower, everything, tater tots. So variety is the best advice that we can give. Trying to look at the ratio of your plate. So say if it's 50% meat, or more, say it's 70% meat, start to change the ratio to bring in some more plants. And then don't underestimate the impacts of stress. So if you feel like you're doing a lot with your diet and it's not really working, then start to look at things like stress and evaluate your environment for toxins. And just know, even though, maybe your mom or dad had something, it doesn't mean that you're going to get it, because you could always work with your lifestyle, and that's going to help to prevent or stave off, or sometimes we can even reverse illness with lifestyle change. And then it's okay to ask for help. Sometimes it takes a village, and don't feel like you have to go it alone all the time, right? So, best case scenario, you get really good support in your home. And sometimes it might seem like people aren't that supportive, but sometimes we have to ask. And sometimes we have to have these kinds of conversations. And then we even have to remind people. So you may have to say Krispy Kreme donuts are your jam, and someone's bringing a box into the house every Sunday. Then say, would you mind putting those in a drawer, or would you mind just buying whatever you're going to eat? I'm trying to make these changes. Sometimes we have to remind people and to try to get support in our house. Sometimes we need more support. So if it's physical activities, say you're going to use physical activity to manage stress, you could be signing up for a yoga class, or having a friend to walk with, or a personal trainer or a group trainer. There's online services like Weight Watchers, that's active, where you're keeping food records. There's passive resources, like I'd mentioned, my Instagram page, maybe you're looking for recipes. And then there's group support and one-on-one support. So you can see someone like me, a registered dietitian, that's on the integrative side, that's going to address, all of these different lifestyle factors. So, but the bottom line, it's okay to ask for help. Sometimes it takes a village. So, if your car broke down, you're not just going to sit there on the highway, right? You're going to put your flashers on, you're going to raise the hood of your car, and you're going to call for help. So if you're going to do that for your car, well, then I hope you'll do it for yourself too. Okay, so I'm going to take any questions. So I'm just going to check the chat. Okay, so the question is, what is an elimination diet? I'm going to stop the share and come back. So let's see. Okay, I'm sorry, it's not showing me on the view. So I'm hoping that I'm going to try putting this on gallery and see. Okay. Okay, there we go. So anyway, so what is an elimination diet? That's a great question. There are many, many types of elimination diets, and it's a great way to tease out if you have food sensitivities. So typically, if there is a food sensitivity, it's going to be to the protein fraction of a food. So it could be gluten, it could be dairy, it could even be the protein in beef. It could be the protein in corn. It could be eggs. So I have a very, very comprehensive list of things. What we do is we take them out for a finite period of time, and it gives time for the gut to heal, and then for the immune system to quiet down. And then once that happens, in a stepwise process, we add each food back, and then we see, are any of these symptoms happening? So say it was hives, or it was joint pain, or it was headaches, or it was weight gain, or so there can be a whole host of, a lot of times it's GI stuff. So we would use that, and it's such a great tool to try to tease out sensitivities. Does anyone else have any questions? No, I answered everything that you ever wanted to know about the anti-inflammatory diet, but we're afraid to ask. Well, if you think of anything else, don't hesitate. Go on my website. There's a contact form and just type it in and I'll respond. Okay, yes, there's a question about dairy. Cow yogurt does count as dairy. So you could try, if you think you have a sensitivity to dairy, you could try pulling it out. And what I like to do personally, if I have clients where different forms of dairy are very important to them. Like they like yogurt, they don't care about ice cream, maybe, but they like cheese. So I would introduce them separately. I would do cow cheese and then separately goat cheese, because some people can tolerate one and not the other. And then I would do yogurt separately because some people can tolerate that because it's fermented. So that would be one that I would kind of break down separately depending on what was important to the client. Does anyone else have any questions? Okay, so I'm going to be sending out a recording. So if you feel like this was a lot of information. Okay, so there's a question about oatmeal. What's the question? So I'm recording this and I'll be sending this out to the email list. Is it good for you? Yes. So steel cut oats is a little bit slower burning. I think the best advice would be to add some kind of like nuts or seeds or a fat, like even just stirring in some peanut butter or almond butter, because that little bit of fat is going to just help it just stay with you a little longer. And it'll make sure that it doesn't break down so fast that you get then this, blood sugar rise and then fall. So yeah, add something to it, because otherwise it's probably going to digest pretty quickly and you'll be looking for something else. Any other questions I can answer? Insulin resistance. Okay, the question is, what is insulin resistance? Insulin resistance is when, for some reason, and it could be a lot of different reasons, sugar is in the bloodstream, but it's having trouble getting into the cells. So one reason is it's grabbing your glucose and trying to get it into the cells, but there could be a problem with the receptor sites on the outside of the cell. So one thing that happens is with weight gain, the cells get a little bigger and it can affect the receptor sites. And so there's trouble getting sugar into the cells. So that's one of the reasons why weight gain causes insulin resistance, and then insulin resistance causes weight gain. So instead of sugar getting into the cell and doing all of those metabolic things it's supposed to do, then we wind up storing it as fat. Any other last minute burning questions? Okay, so again, I recorded this. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to send this to the email list because I feel like maybe this was a lot of information. I know it went pretty quickly. So you'll have it. Feel free to share it. I'm just going to edit down some of the parts and I'll upload it to YouTube, and I'll have it, before the weekend to you. Well, thank you very much for joining. I know sometimes we spend a lot of time on Zoom and we get Zoom fatigue by the end of the day. So I really appreciate you, and you're welcome. Thank you. I got a nice thank you in the chat. So thank you, and have a great rest of your evening.